This lecture focuses on Earth's biomes and biodiversity. Healthy biomes are integral to the survival of life on planet Earth. Natural systems, similar to those seen on Earth, may be important for the evolution of life on other planets. Earth's biome systems have been evolving over the past 4.5 billion years, resulting in the biodiversity that we see today. In this lecture, we will explore the composition of Earth's different biomes. We will examine how biomes evolve and change over time, and we will learn about life in each biome. Biomes and Biodiversity, created, written, and taught by Brian Lauer, Stephen Lauer, Kylene Shaw, and Ella Weaver for the School of Environment and Natural Resources at Ohio State University, with support provided by the U.S. National Science Foundation. We have four main objectives for this lecture. One, define a biome and identify its abiotic and biotic components. Two, differentiate the physical and biological factors affecting the evolution of life within a biome. Three, recognize the biodiversity that is present within biomes and define the resilience of biomes. Four, identify current threats to Earth's biomes, biodiversity, and ecosystem services. Our first objective is to define a biome and identify its abiotic and biotic components. Before we can start to talk about what a biome is, we must first talk about what defines a biome and how it's different from the other systems that we have on Earth. A biome is composed of both abiotic and biotic factors. Let's look at the abiotic factors first. Abiotic factors are non-living chemical and physical components within the environment which affect an ecosystem. These include inorganic compounds, meaning things that are not made up of carbon-hydrogen bonds. This means that abiotic factors are not organic compounds. Abiotic factors impact an organism's ability to survive, grow, reproduce, and determine the types and quantities of organisms that can exist within an ecosystem. Examples of abiotic factors are air, water, sunlight, soil minerals, and humidity. These are components that may not be obvious to us when we enter a biome. For example, carbon dioxide and oxygen are invisible to our eyes, but we know that these factors are present because trees and humans are alive. Abiotic factors are absolutely essential for life on Earth, and abiotic factors are likely essential for life on other planets as well. Biotic factors are the organic living components of a biome. These factors are composed of organic compounds, meaning that they are composed of carbon-hydrogen molecules. Biotic factors can have both direct and indirect effects on a biome. They can impact the organisms themselves, their interactions with one another, the food chains that exist, waste cycles, disease, etc. Biotic factors are all living things, such as viruses, bacteria, plants, animals, fungi, insects, even parasites. Biotic factors are also organic things like molecules, DNA, RNA, proteins, lipids, sugars, carbohydrates, and even include waste products like feces. The hierarchy of life shows how systems are organized on Earth. It starts with an individual organism, shown here as an individual elephant, and transitions to higher and higher orders of complexity as we move from individual to population to community, ecosystem, and finally to biome. An individual organism, shown on the left as a single elephant, is a biotic factor. This elephant itself is made up of smaller biotic factors, such as organs, tissues, cells, DNA, RNA, and proteins. A biome situated at the top of this hierarchy of life and is composed of ecosystems that occupy a specific geographical area. Biomes consist of both abiotic factors like oxygen, water, and minerals, as well as biotic factors such as communities of flora and fauna. Biomes are defined by temperature, precipitation, latitude, vegetation, and animals that live within it. By understanding how things function within each level, we can understand how life functions as part of a larger natural system on our planet, how life evolved on Earth, and perhaps how life evolved on other planets. What is a biome? Biomes are large, naturally occurring community systems that have been established by the global climate and are defined by the microorganisms, animals, and plants that are adapted to live within the geographical area. Biomes are extremely important to life. They have changed over time, moved geographically many times during the history of our planet, and will continue to do so. Terrestrial biomes are where humans live and are found on all Earth's continents. It is important to understand that a biome is a broader term than habitat or ecosystem. A biome covers a large area and can consist of several different types of ecosystems or habitats. Climate is the long-term precipitation and temperature patterns for a large geographical area. It's the weather patterns that occur at a location over decades, centuries, and even longer. Here we see Earth's average surface temperature and average precipitation over a 30-year period from 1961 to 1990. Changes in the colors of the maps show how temperature and precipitation have fluctuated. Indeed, Earth's climate patterns have changed over its 4.6 billion year lifespan and will continue to do so for billions of years to come. Humans evolved over the past 5 million years to live in moderate climates with mild temperatures and mild precipitation. The 8 billion humans living on Earth today need moderate climate patterns to maintain our way of life, to grow, to have fresh water, to build our homes. Too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry are not ideal climates for human society. This is why climate change today is such a serious challenge to humanity and our future. Several major factors control climate patterns on Earth. These are shown here and include temperature, precipitation, tilt of the Earth on its axis, the sun, latitude, elevation, existence of mountain ranges in the shape of the land, ocean currents, winds, vegetation, and human activity. The two main components of climate are temperature and precipitation. Here we see two climagraphs for two different biomes. A climograph is a single graph that is used to show the average temperature and average precipitation for each month of the year. Temperature values are shown on the left y-axis, and data for each month are shown as points on a line. Precipitation amounts are shown on the right y-axis, and data are showed as bars for each month. Temperature is measured in degrees Celsius and precipitation in centimeters. In these two examples, you can see that Biome 1 is much colder and much drier than Biome 2. Biome 1 is located near the Arctic Circle and is especially cold November through February and warm June through September. Biome 2 is located in the Amazon rainforest and is warm to hot all year and wet all year. If we add up the total precipitation for all 12 months, we can see that Biome 1 receives approximately 16 centimeters of precipitation each year, while Biome 2 receives 350 centimeters of precipitation each year. Looking at these two climagraphs, we would expect to see different types of plants and different animals living in each biome. Earth is naturally tilted on its axis at about 23.5 degrees. This tilt is what causes Earth to have 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, winter. These 4 seasons come and go as Earth orbits the sun. In June, the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun. As a result, The northern half of Earth receives most of the sun's direct radiation and experiences peak summer. The opposite happens in December when the southern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun and thus experiences peak summer. In March and September, the sun is directly over the equator. As a result, each hemisphere receives equal amounts of radiation from the sun, and thus it's either spring or fall. Organisms living at higher latitudes have evolved to live with this seasonality. For example, Columbus, Ohio has deciduous trees like oaks and maples. These types of trees produce leaves during the spring and summer and lose their leaves in fall and winter. This adaptation allows deciduous trees to capture sunlight and grow by photosynthesis when they receive the most solar radiation, spring and summer, and conserve energy and go dormant when solar radiation is at its minimum, fall and winter. This map shows the locations of different biomes on Earth. Ohio State University is in Ohio in the United States within a temperate deciduous forest biome, shown in lime color. Columbus, Ohio is located at about 40 degrees north latitude and therefore experiences 4 distinct seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. Deciduous trees found in Ohio lose their leaves in the fall and regrow them in the spring. You may be thinking, how many different biomes does planet Earth have? The answer all depends on how narrowly you define a biome. Different scientists classify biomes in different ways. Biome types can be broad and defined by just a few climatic factors, such as precipitation and temperature. Or biomes can be very specific and narrowly defined by several climatic factors, such as precipitation, temperature, vegetation, soil type, elevation. For example, we can categorize all of the state of South Dakota in the USA as a grassland, or we can be more specific and refer to the different types of grasslands within the state itself, such as short grass prairie, wet meadow, high mountain grassland, or dry lowland grassland. It's difficult to know exactly how many biomes Earth has, and researchers have differing opinions about this and how to categorize them. Biomes do not have set boundaries. We cannot travel through a desert and see a perfect line that divides it exactly from an adjacent forest. It is much more likely that two biomes will be separated by a diffuse intermediate zone or transition zone. These boundaries are difficult to define and categorize and are often the reason we see some biome maps containing dozens of uniquely defined biomes. Earth also has climatic conditions and species that are extremely rare and only exist in small pockets around the globe. It can be very challenging to classify these unique regions. Finally, climate change is a constant and determining force of Earth that causes biomes to move and shift over time. What was once a boreal forest biome 25,000 years ago may now be a temperate deciduous forest. Earth's biomes can be separated into 3 broad categories: marine biomes, freshwater biomes, and terrestrial biomes. These categories are based on saltwater, freshwater, land, and climate. They are also determined by the predominant plant species, such as trees, shrubs, grasses, as well as dominant animal species, such as fish, reptile, mammal. Humans are found almost exclusively living in terrestrial biomes on Earth. Earth's major terrestrial biomes are largely defined by climate. Climate is the long-term weather patterns that a location experiences, specifically temperature and precipitation. Temperature varies with latitude, that's the distance north or south from the equator, and altitude, elevation, how high above sea level. As latitude and altitude increase, temperatures decrease. Precipitation patterns also vary across the globe. For example, we see a lot of rainfall at the equator where tropical rainforests are found. The equator receives plenty of sunshine throughout the year, and this heat and energy leads to low pressure systems, thunderstorms, and rainfall. Robert Whittaker was an American ecologist who in the 1970s proposed the Whittaker biome classification. This scheme classifies biomes based on precipitation and temperature. We see the total annual precipitation on the y-axis and the average annual temperature on the x-axis. The bottom left, we see locations that are cold and dry, and these are classified as tundra biomes. At the top right, we see areas that are hot and wet, and these are classified as tropical rainforest. All other biomes occur between these two extremes. Plants rely on sunlight and precipitation to live, and thus the major plant species found in a specific biome is defined by its climate. Earth's different climates give rise to different types of vegetation found in different terrestrial biomes. Biomes that have high temperatures and high rainfall will have a lot of biodiversity and a lot of vegetation. Biomes that receive little to no precipitation and experience cold temperatures will have less biodiversity and less vegetation. For example, a tropical rainforest biome is going to have a diverse assortment of plants, including trees, flowers, vines, mosses, ferns, and so on. On the other hand, a cold desert biome will have limited vegetation with a sparse population of plant species that have evolved to live in these rather harsh conditions. Biomes can be broken down into individual ecosystems. If you remember, an ecosystem is defined as a community and its abiotic factors. To categorize the different types of ecosystems found within a biome, ecologists study the interactions between their biotic and abiotic components. Does the humidity of the area promote growth of a certain species of plant? Are there species of wildlife that require a specific amount of water or other resource in order to live and reproduce? What are the different types of predator-prey interactions that occur within the ecosystem? These are the types of questions that ecologists ask when they are in the field conducting their research. Terrestrial biomes are those that are found on land. Here we see three examples of terrestrial biomes. Tropical rainforests are hot and wet all year round. They are known for their dense vegetation and abundance of wildlife. Tropical rainforests can be found along the equator in South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. A savanna biome experiences two extremes during the year, a dry season and a wet season. As seen in the middle picture, the vegetation in the savanna is a mix of trees and grasses. Savannas can be found in a wide range of locations, including Australia, Africa, and India. The desert biome is one you are likely familiar with, and this type of biome is very dry. Deserts receive very little rainfall all year long. As a result, desert biomes can only support a limited number of plant species. The type of vegetation that is found in a desert biome often has little plant structure above ground. But these plants do have an extensive root structure below ground that functions to both reach water found deep below the surface and store water reserves in their roots for periods of drought. A temperate forest or temperate deciduous forest biome is what we see in southeast Ohio in the USA. Temperate deciduous forests experience four distinct seasons. The major vegetation of this biome, deciduous trees, have evolved to live in this climate by losing their leaves each fall, going dormant in the winter, and regrowing their leaves for photosynthesis in the springtime. A Mediterranean biome, or chaparral, experiences hot, dry summers with an overall moist climate. It often has a coastal location with shrubs as the dominant vegetation, transitioning into woodland along its boundaries. Finally, we have a tundra biome. This is one of the coldest biomes on Earth, and it is found at high latitudes near Earth's poles. The climate consists of cold temperatures and minimal rainfall. In the wintertime, the landscape is covered with a blanket of snow and ice. Tundra biomes do experience a quick spring and summer when they see fast growth of short grasses and shrubs. For our class, we will focus mostly on terrestrial biomes because that's where humans live. Other classes here at Ohio State University focus on freshwater and marine biomes, and we encourage you to enroll in these courses if you'd like to learn more. Freshwater biomes are systems that consist of water that isn't salt water or brackish water. They typically contain a lot of nutrients that support a wide variety of life. Freshwater systems come in many different shapes and sizes. Freshwater biomes can have liquid water, Lake Erie in the summertime, or frozen water, Lake Erie in the winter. Rivers, ponds, and lakes can be different sizes, different depths. Some can be isolated systems, while others can be situated near urban areas. Streams and rivers are flowing bodies of water. They support many different species and can vary from the river's headwaters to its mouth. Wetlands can be marshes, swamps, bogs, and are very wet, humid, and moist environments. Wetlands support some of the greatest species diversity on Earth. Finally, marine biomes are those that contain salt water and support life that thrives in salt water. Marine biomes include oceans, estuaries, and coral reefs. Each is diverse and can sustain numerous ecosystems within. Earth has numerous natural biomes, but because Earth supports over 8 billion humans, it also has large areas that have been impacted and altered by human activity. 8 billion people is a huge number, and we require a large amount of land, water, and air to keep us alive. Humans require a great deal of space to live, raise livestock, grow crops, build cities and roads, and dump our waste. All of these activities impact Earth's natural biomes, altering them oftentimes to the detriment of Earth's natural flora and fauna. Because humans have altered many natural systems, some scientists believe that we should reclassify many natural biomes as anthropogenic biomes or anthromes. This map shows areas across the globe that humans utilize for various needs, such as urban landscapes, croplands, rangelands. You can see from the map that human activity is expansive and extensive. There is almost no land on Earth that hasn't been impacted by human activity. The few remaining standouts include the ice sheets of Antarctica and Greenland and the desert biome of the Sahara.
At the end of this video, you should be able to differentiate the physical and biological factors that are affecting the evolution of life. Our planet is unique among other planets of our solar system in that it supports the lives of millions of individual species. Now, how are species distributed through Earth's biomes? How have species living on Earth changed over time? And what natural processes have caused these changes? Well, over Earth's 4.6 billion year history, different species of plants and animals have adapted to live, reproduce, and populate each of Earth's unique biomes. Each biome contains different, distinct populations of species that have developed the ability to grow, reproduce, and ultimately thrive in that particular biome. This map shows the diversity of amphibian species across the globe. We see certain geographical locations, specifically those situated near the equator, can support vast numbers of amphibians, shown in this darker red or orange color on the map. This is because these terrestrial biomes experience more precipitation, gain more energy from the sun, and thus can adequately support the diverse needs of many different amphibian species. Evolution is the process by which the characteristics of a species change over numerous generations. All life evolves, all life changes, all life diversifies. This is a natural process that is the result of life interacting with its surrounding biotic and abiotic factors. Adaptations occur over time as species adapt to constant changes in their environment. All species need to grow, reproduce, and establish a population in order to survive. So, to accomplish this, populations must constantly adapt to the biotic and abiotic changes around them to maximize their growth and reproduction. The secret to evolution's success is rooted within each organism's DNA or their genetic makeup. The DNA sequence within an organism controls what the organism will become. Gene frequencies within a population naturally change over time from one generation to the next. So, better adapted individuals will survive, grow, reproduce, and pass on their genes to their offspring. This can change how common certain variants of a particular gene will be found within a population. Some genes will become more prevalent, some genes will disappear, and those genes that result in the most fit organism will be passed on to the next generation. This is a simple example of evolution through natural selection. These are all the same tree species, but just like with humans, the DNA for each individual tree is slightly different than its neighbor. Some trees have DNA that encodes for short roots, or S, others medium length, or M, or long roots, L. Changes in precipitation patterns select for trees based on the length of their roots. Long roots can reach the water located deeper in the soil during drought. However, during wet periods, trees with long roots can take up too much water and perhaps die. Wet climate selects for trees with short roots. As precipitation patterns change over hundreds to thousands of years, so too will this population of trees. In this simple example, precipitation patterns selects for trees with different root lengths. If precipitation patterns change rapidly, for example, this biome goes from monsoon rains to drought over a period of 10 to 20 years, this population of trees could possibly go extinct. This is because large deciduous trees grow slowly and therefore would not be able to evolve and adapt fast enough to transition from a wet to a dry climate. Evolution by natural selection is a slow process that takes thousands to millions of years. Likewise, natural climate change occurs over long periods of time. Extinction of a species occurs when climate changes faster than an organism can adapt. Human activity can cause fast and dramatic climatic changes that takes place in a comparably short period of time, such as years to decades. Organisms cannot evolve and adapt to these dramatic changes in such a short period of time, and this can lead to their extinction. A current example of this is polar bears. They face the real threat of extinction as rapid global warming causes a dramatic loss of the Arctic sea ice where they live. There are four main forces of evolution that drive it onward: mutation, gene flow, genetic drift, and natural selection. This image here is a drawing from Charles Darwin as he studied finches in the Galapagos Islands in 1835. Charles Darwin was a British naturalist whose research on the Galapagos Islands developed the theory of evolution based on natural selection. He documented bird species that he studied on the islands, where he noticed changes in the bird beaks from one island to the next island. Some beaks were sharper, some wider, some thinner, some longer. Darwin's discovery showed how different finch species can all evolve from a common ancestor. This evolution caused different species of finch to have different beak characteristics depending on their unique survival needs. Now let's look at genetic mutations, the first force. A mutation occurs when a gene or a sequence of DNA that encodes a protein is altered or damaged, resulting in a change to the gene's DNA sequence. Mutations can range in size, from one single gene to large changes in an entire chromosome. Mutations can be beneficial or neutral to an organism, but mutations can also be harmful, resulting in disease or other serious conditions that can lead to death. Here we see red tulips, with one tulip plant having a single mutation in one of its genes. The DNA sequence CG mutates to a TT in the DNA. This single mutation causes some of its flower petals to be yellow instead of red. Next, gene flow is the movement of genetic variation between populations. Gene flow may also be referred to as migration, as it occurs when there is movement of individuals from one population to another. These individuals carry their genetic makeup with them and introduce it to their new population, which can act to transfer new genes to a new population. This photograph shows a marine iguana. This species is specific to the Galapagos Islands, but was not always present there. Species that exist on islands are isolated from other populations, and gene flow to these populations is much more difficult. Gene flow to these islands did occur by the land iguana from the mainland. When this species migrated to the Galapagos Islands, it evolved into these marine iguanas, becoming the only iguana that has the ability to swim. The third force of evolution is genetic drift. Genetic drift is the change in gene frequencies for a population over time due to random mating that results in the loss of some gene variants. Chance always plays a role in whether an individual survives, reproduces, and passes on its genes. Genetic drift occurs in all populations, but its effects are more prevalent in smaller populations. Here we can see the effects of genetic drift in populations with sizes of 20, 200, and 2,000 individuals. As the population size increases, gene frequency becomes more regular, and the populations are not as readily impacted by natural events. Unfortunately, because of genetic drift, some gene forms can be lost forever. Finally, the last force is natural selection. Natural selection is a bit different than the other three mechanisms of evolution. Natural selection is a process by which organisms that are best adapted to their environments survive, reproduce, and pass on their genes to the next generation. Natural selection acts on heritable or genetically determined characteristics. These are features that help organisms adapt to their environment, survive, and produce more offspring than organisms lacking that feature. In this simple example, you see mice with white or gray fur and owls with good or poor eyesight. Each species has a trait that makes them more successful or less successful to surviving in their biome. The individuals with the best suited genetic traits will thrive and produce more offspring having that same genetic trait. By this process, we see that adaptive genes and traits are selected for within a population. There are several ways that natural selection works. First, stabilizing selection, which selects for the normal phenotypes and stays away from extreme traits. In this example, robin egg clutch size of 4 eggs ensures more baby birds will survive. Second, directional selection favors an extreme trait to help an organism survive. A famous example of directional selection is the peppered moth of the European Industrial Revolution. The original population of peppered moths were light color to camouflage with their forest surroundings. But as the Industrial Revolution burned more and more coal, Europe became covered in black soot, and as a result, dark-colored moths were better camouflaged against the black soot background. Predators could now see the light-colored moths and ate them more often. This moth population shifted from light-colored moths to dark-colored moths. Finally, disruptive selection. In this form of natural selection, both extreme traits are more favored over intermediate traits. An example of disruptive selection is shown with rabbit species that have 3 colors. The two extremes, gray and Himalayan, allow rabbits to hide as they blend into the surrounding environment. The intermediate, white rabbits, are easy for predators to see and thus eat. The gray-colored and the Himalayan-colored rabbits will survive, reproduce, and have more offspring, and these offspring will have the color traits of their parents, gray color and Himalayan color. For species to continually survive in a changing environment, they must adapt. This requires an adaptation, which is any trait that helps an individual survive and reproduce. Now, different species within a biome often share adaptations for that particular biome. For example, different species of animals that live in hot, desert biomes are all nocturnal. This is a behavioral adaptation that allows them to conserve water and energy. Adaptations may be in the form of physical characteristics, for example, longer legs, or it may be a change in an organism's behavior, for example, feeding at night. Camels have many adaptations that help them survive in harsh desert environments. They have large, wide feet that help them to walk very efficiently on hot, shifting sand. They have long eyelashes that protect their eyes from blowing sand, and most noticeably, they have large humps on their back that store fat for when they need an energy boost when food is not readily available. Let's look more closely at physical adaptations. Physical adaptations are those that affect an organism's physical features, such as the shape of a bird's beak or the color of its plumage. Physical adaptations are coded for within an organism's DNA and control physical traits like body size, shape, color, and movement. Physical adaptations occur gradually over many generations and result from changes in an organism's genetic material. Several examples of physical adaptations include the webbed feet of waterfowl that allow them to move more efficiently through water, the strong beak of a macaw that allows the bird to crack open extremely hard nuts to eat. Camouflage of an owl against a tree trunk protects the owl from predators and allows it to hunt more effectively. Finally, we see an anaconda utilizing its waterproof scales as it swims to look for prey. And now the other form of adaptations. Behavioral adaptations are those that affect the activities that an organism performs in order to survive and reproduce. Behavioral adaptations can be something that the organism is born with, such as an instinct, or something that the organism learns over time. Behavioral adaptations often take less time for an organism to learn than do physical adaptations. Examples of behavioral adaptations include an opossum that uses a defense mechanism of playing dead when threatened by a predator. Geese fly in a V-shaped formation as they migrate. This assists the geese to coordinate movement and communicate with one another so they can keep track of all individuals within the formation. Perhaps more importantly, the V-shaped formation reduces wind resistance and thus saves valuable energy as the birds migrate over great distances. Next, many bear species hibernate in the winter months. Hibernation allows bears to enter a deep sleep during those winter months, conserving energy when food supplies are limited. And finally, male herons use a courtship dance and vocalizations to attract a female mate. Now that we've talked about how species can adapt and evolve to their specific biomes, we must also talk about genetic diversity. All populations require genetic diversity in order to evolve, survive, reproduce, and live. Genetic diversity is the heritable variation or differences in the DNA among individuals of a species. Within a single species, there are countless variations and differences in the DNA sequence of individuals. Each individual within a single species has a slightly different genome, and these differences allows a species to survive and thrive. Now, cheetahs are a good example. Cheetahs are currently listed as a threatened species because their global population is very low, with only about 7,000 total cheetahs. This cat is also confined to about 10% of its historical range. These two pressures, a small range size and low genetic diversity, are threatening cheetahs with extinction. Their low genetic diversity results in several problems, including a poor sperm quality for male cheetahs. This makes breeding and survival difficult because only a small percentage of cheetah young survive to adulthood. Female cheetahs use behavioral adaptations to meet these challenges. Female cheetahs will mate with multiple male suitors to fertilize more eggs and thus produce more cubs per litter. The physiology of female cheetahs allows for an induced ovulation, which means a new egg is produced every time mating occurs. When a female cheetah mates multiple times with many males, the genetic diversity of her cubs increases, and the likelihood of cub survival also increases.
Objective 3. You should be able to recognize the biodiversity that is present within biomes and identify the resiliency that this diversity provides. Before we can begin to talk about Earth's biodiversity, we must recognize the vast diversity of life forms that are present on Earth and the vast number of organisms that are still unknown to science. Earth has approximately 1.8 million species that have been identified by science. These are species that scientists have recorded, cataloged, and perhaps even studied in a laboratory or field setting. It takes a great deal of time, money, and resources to closely study a species and learn about its biochemistry, physiology, anatomy, lifestyle, habitat, etc. There are still tens of millions of species living on Earth that are not known to humans. While it's difficult to estimate just how many species are yet to be discovered, scientists estimate that somewhere between 3 million to 100 million species are still not known. Vast numbers of species will likely go extinct before humans even see them. Therefore, it is increasingly important that we make environmental management decisions that consider this vast biodiversity so that we can account for all the complexities that may impact our decisions. What is biodiversity and why does it matter to Earth's health and human health? Biodiversity is the immense variety of life on Earth. It includes not only the diversity within species and individuals, but diversity between species, communities, and ecosystems. Biodiversity forms the foundation of all ecosystem services that support our overall well-being as humans. Without Earth's vast biodiversity, humans would never have existed. Just think of all the biodiversity that was and is absolutely required for human existence, such as fruits, vegetables, nuts, meats, fish, cotton, leather, wool, silk, antibodies, medications, pharmaceuticals, spices, sugar, tea, coffee, chocolate, cereals, breads, wines, beers, and countless other natural biological resources. There are many ways that we can categorize biodiversity or diversity in nature. We have already examined genetic diversity and how genes vary among populations. Species diversity is the total number and abundance of species within a community. Population diversity follows this same concept but considers age, sex, distribution, and range. Finally, diversity of ecosystems, which considers populations, abiotic factors, types of biome, and the complexities or differences between ecosystems. Some places on Earth have a great deal of biodiversity compared to other locations. These areas are referred to as biodiversity hotspots. They are truly special areas that support endangered and endemic species. Endangered species are at high risk of extinction. Endemic species are unique to a defined location. Many biodiversity hotspots are so unique that they are only found in just a few special places and nowhere else on Earth. Geographically, biodiversity hotspots are very small areas, but these locations contain more plant life and animal species than anywhere else on Earth. It is extremely important that humans protect and preserve biological hotspots to protect the life that relies on them. Several examples of biological hotspots on Earth include the Great Barrier Reef, the Amazon rainforest, and New Zealand. This map shows Earth's 24 or so biodiversity hotspots. The equator is shown with a green dashed line. You'll notice that many hotspots are at or near the equator. The equator receives more sunlight and more precipitation than anywhere else on Earth. As a result, areas near the equator have ideal climates, resources, and nutrients to support species richness. Tropical rainforest biomes are found all along the equator, and we see these biomes highlighted in red in South America, Mexico, Africa, Madagascar, and Southeast Asia. When we think about biodiversity, typically we think about unmanaged natural systems. We envision a rainforest with a wide variety of plant species. We see a forest with a plethora of wildlife. But it's also important to consider how biodiversity applies to human managed ecosystems as well. Managed ecosystems include cities, farms, croplands, rangelands, aquaculture, parks, and even urban areas. Biodiversity in these human managed ecosystems will be different than natural systems, but nonetheless, it is still important that humans maintain healthy managed systems. We rely on these systems for food, recreation, clean water, clean air, and healthy lifestyles. Therefore, it is important that managed systems function properly, are healthy, and that these systems are sustainable in order to protect the health and well-being of future human populations. Now let's look at some of the most important resources and services that Earth's biodiversity provides humans. First, human health. A vast number of plants on Earth are used in many of the medications and pharmaceuticals that keep us healthy and allow us to live relatively long lives. We use plant extracts and substances, for example, roots, flowers, leaves, seeds, for medications, antibiotics, and treatments for all sorts of human illnesses and injuries. Humans rely on these medications to treat and cure diseases. In addition, with ongoing scientific research, plants will no doubt continue to provide cures to an assortment of illnesses and diseases that plague human society. Earth's biodiversity is essential to agriculture and our food supply. Without biodiversity, we wouldn't have the fruits, vegetables, meats, clothing, such as cotton, leather, and silk, lumber, spices, wines, beers, coffees, that we have today. The cultivated crops that you see here and that we purchase at our modern grocery stores have all been bred and cultivated from wild ancestor species. Earth's vast biodiversity has led to the vast and numerous choices that we have today in our grocery stores. Biodiversity in our agricultural systems allows us to grow more crops, different types of crops, and crops that are resistant to pests and drought. These will be important factors for sustaining our population of 8 billion humans today and the billions of humans yet to be born. It's easy to see why biodiversity is important for plant and animal species, and it's easy to see why biodiversity is important to human health and agriculture. But are there other reasons why biodiversity is so important for human survival and life on Earth? To understand this, we must define ecosystem services. Ecosystem services are the essential ecological processes that make life on Earth possible. Biodiversity lends itself to these services. Without a wide variety of plants, animals, and ecosystems all working together in harmony, life on Earth wouldn't be possible. There are four types of ecosystem services: provisioning, regulating, cultural, and supporting. Provisioning services are those that we have already discussed, such as agriculture, medication, clothing, shelter, and building materials. These are material items or products that we rely on and utilize. Regulating services are services that make life on Earth ideal for humans. Clean air, ideal temperatures, ideal rainfall for agriculture, ideal soil quality. Regulating services are natural systems that make Earth an ideal place for life. Cultural services or social services are the non-material benefits that people derive from the environment. These include spiritual, recreational, aesthetic, and so on. While difficult to estimate the total value of cultural services, it's easy to understand when one considers quality of life. Would you rather live in a place that has polluted, smog-filled air, mercury in the soil, dirty water, or live in a place that has clean air, clean water, nice climate, sunny days, and beautiful parks? Finally, supporting services. These are the services that are required to maintain all other services and make sure that production continues and is sustainable within an ecosystem. Examples of supporting services include formation of soil, nutrient cycling, photosynthesis, and natural water purification. We understand the value of ecosystem services in terms of supporting life on Earth, such as providing oxygen for animals, carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, clean water for drinking, clean soil for growing food, clean air for breathing. But can we also think about these services in terms of dollar value worth to humans? Here, economists have determined the value of each ecosystem service in terms of dollars per year for the United States. While it's easy to calculate how much our food costs, how much a cotton shirt costs, or our monthly water bill, other services can be a bit tricky to calculate. Notice that this graph is in billions of dollars per year. So for example, 117 for pollination means that pollination by insects and wind was valued at a whopping $117 billion in 1994. And nature did this for free, didn't charge us a cent. Notice that the data in this graph is for 1994. This is when Earth's human population was about 6 billion people. Today, we have 8 billion people living on our planet, 30% more people living on Earth today compared to 1994. And so these values are significantly higher today.
At the end of this lecture video, you should be able to identify current threats to Earth's biomes, biodiversity, and ecosystem services. You should now be familiar with Earth's biomes, biodiversity, and ecosystem services. We will finish this biomes and biodiversity lecture by covering some current threats to life on Earth. First, the well-being of a biome and the adaptability of the biome's organisms are highly dependent on their interactions with Earth's climate. We have already seen that some biomes are more susceptible to threats and thus should be protected and preserved. This map shows ecological sensitivity for terrestrial plant species living on Earth. Shown is the percent change of plant species living in each location that is predicted to change as a result of human-induced climate change. This map was created by scientists at NASA and Caltech for a 100-year period from the years 2000 to 2100. Notice that a great deal of change is predicted to occur in the northern hemisphere, noted by the red, orange, yellow, and green areas on the map. You might be thinking, Earth's biomes and climate have continuously been changing over time, and you would be correct. So why are we talking about things like ecological sensitivity now? Well, we know that climate change and other cataclysmic events have led to 5 major extinction events for Earth that we can see in this graph. During each of these 5 events, many species went extinct, while others emerged, thrived, and grew in numbers. Many scientists believe that we are now in Earth's sixth major extinction event. This period of geological time is known as the Holocene or Anthropocene. This is the period of time when human activity has been the dominant force acting on Earth's climate and environment. Now, the Anthropocene is unique from all previous eras for two striking reasons. First, in the past, Earth's human population was equal to zero, so past events didn't impact humans because they had not evolved on Earth yet. But today, we have over 8 billion people living on our planet, and so changes that happen today are going to have profound impacts on human life and well being. The second reason is extinction rates. If we look at today's extinction rates, that is the time it takes for a species to go from a lot of individuals to 0 individuals, we can calculate this value. And when we do, we see that today's extinction rates for Earth species are anywhere from 10 to 10,000 times greater than the natural background rates. These values are deeply concerning because they suggest that unless drastic measures are taken, and taken quickly, we will see thousands of species go extinct in a very short period of time. This will no doubt have negative ramifications to human life and human health. Now, remember that biodiversity is integral to the survival of our planet. It is the variety and variability of life at all levels, including genetic, species, population, community, ecosystem, and biome. So, what exactly is causing Earth's biomes and Earth's biodiversity to deteriorate at such a rapid pace? Well, the simple answer is unchecked human activity. Some of the major threats that we see today are habitat loss, overharvesting of resources such as fish, grassland, forests, pollution of the air, water, and soil, plastic waste, pervasiveness of invasive species, urban sprawl, and perhaps most notably, climate change. All of today's major threats to biodiversity are caused by humans and our activities. There's a lot of us, around 8 billion, so we use a lot of resources and we produce a lot of waste. These are major threats to all life, including human life on planet Earth. Here we see different types of human activity and how each impacts vertebrate species on Earth. Agriculture sits at the top of the chart as the #1 threat to Earth's vertebrates. The graph shows that agriculture threatens over 60% of all vertebrate species living on Earth today. Yet, agriculture is very important for human health and survival. So the question for humanity today becomes, how do we grow food that we need and do it in a sustainable way so that we don't cause the extinction of countless species and limit biodiversity? Endangered species are those populations that are at a high risk of going extinct. These species do not have enough space, do not have enough food, are overharvested, are not able to reproduce at healthy rates, and their population numbers are dangerously low. If things continue as they are, the species can go extinct in just a few years. The International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List is a global tool that is used by governments, businesses, wildlife organizations, and others to understand and inform us of the planet's biodiversity and the current status of all of the planet's species. There are currently more than 116,000 species on the IUCN Red List, with more than 31,000 plant and animal species listed that are threatened with extinction. Now, humans aren't all bad, and we are making wiser decisions that can help turn things around for many endangered species. What can be done to preserve Earth's biodiversity? We can 1. Pass legislation and agree to international treaties. This can be done at all levels, from small local action to large international agreements, such as the Paris Agreement. 2. We can complete restoration of damaged ecosystems or biomes. This restoration may come in the form of reintroducing native species, removing dams, removing invasive species, or cleaning up pollution. 3. We can set aside land to be protected from human activity. This can be in the form of parks, wildlife preserves, or sanctuaries that protect and preserve the biodiversity and minimize threats. 4. We can target individual species with captive breeding programs. Species that are in the most severe decline can be chosen to enter captive breeding programs at zoos, wildlife sanctuaries, and aquariums. These programs face many challenges, but with constant improvements, we see many examples of species reintroduction to natural preserves through captive breeding programs. A success story can be seen in the captive breeding program of the giant panda bear in China. And 5, finally, we can purchase and use locally grown and sourced products which we know are produced sustainably. Preserving biodiversity and minimizing future threats to biomes ultimately involves changing human behavior and human activities. These can be challenging obstacles to overcome. We like our modern way of life with our technology, modern conveniences, travel, social activities, fancy clothing, nice apartments, cool cars, etc. Unfortunately, these things all impact Earth and our environment. And so it's important to consider how our actions may impact the world around us and to try to live wonderful lives, but do it in a sustainable and responsible manner. Earth is our home, and we have been part of the Earth for billions of years. And if we're lucky, we will be part of Earth for billions of years to come. But it's very important that we protect and we care for our home. If we wait for someone else, if we rely on governments or companies or organizations to make the needed changes, we may ultimately fail. The only way to protect Earth for our quality of life, for our well being, and for the well being of our children, for the well being of all life on planet Earth, is for each one of us to take responsibility for our actions. Each one of us can be the solution. 8 billion humans and 8 billion solutions.